Good morning. This is Rose Mulroney. I am one of your licensed spiritual practitioners here at Soul Gem. And I want to welcome you to this free call that's exploring the upside to your dark side. So this is about looking at actually three archetypes, which is the rebel, the saboteur, and the addict. And if you're like me, I've had some positive experiences and I've had some not so positive experiences with those. But what we want to look at, and what I'm going to talk us through in this webinar series, is really how to harness those so that you can use them and I can use them for my good, so that I'm using them in an empowered way, as opposed to feeling like they're just taking me down and taking me out of the game. So on this call today, we're just going to explore the rebel a little bit. And where I'll start with is when I was 15 years old. My sisters and I, so I come from a household of all women except for my father and our dog, whose name is Mike. And so we went over to my cousin's house, a household made up of both females and males. And one of those males was the same age as I, so it's my cousin Keith. So my cousin Keith and I would always get in trouble. We were bosom buddies. He was the brother I never had. And my Uncle Gene, his father, would always be yelling at us and saying, "Hey kids, you need to simmer down, you need to calm down." So, of which we always use as the opportunity to do the opposite, right? So we thought we were going to be so cool and rebel against my Uncle Gene telling us to simmer. And so we started playing a game of chase, the end of which resulted in my cousin running into a tree branch, hitting his head, and almost knocking himself out. So, being the cool rebels that we thought we were, suddenly we were hit with a slap in the face, and I had to go to my parents and expose the fact that we were not listening to my uncle, had not listened to him, and basically got in a lot of trouble, including a potential trip to the hospital, to the ER room. So that was not a good example of myself and my cousin Keith rebelling. That did not have positive results to it. Fast forward into my 40s, and a large window company, of which will remain nameless, but nevertheless, we had their architecture series windows in our home. We had them open, and we were due to go on vacation, so we needed to, close and seal up all of the windows, and so we were prepping our home for that, and realized, hey, this window is not going to close. So we called the very large window companies, customer service. They prompted to basically say, in so many words, "Sorry for the inconvenience, we really can't help you." And we went, okay, well, that makes no sense. We're going to have to wait a whole month in order for you to help us close our window. We're going on vacation. We're leaving. We're in a 3-story. This is not, how can this be? That makes no sense. So, using my knowledge of social media, I pulled together a series of tweets. I included a hashtag. I included this large window company's Twitter handle, and reached out to my network. As it turns out, realized that one of my clients had a summer home in another state. Their next door neighbor was a big executive of this company. This big executive saw what I was doing on social media and went, "Whoa, okay, this is not good. We do not look good. And this woman is about to launch her social campaign against us. And before you knew it, we had the customer service team calling us. We had their experts calling us. They were over to our home in less than 24 hours. They took care of everything. The executive that was a friend of my neighbor's apologized to us. And amazingly, it found out that this executive is a huge fan of Julia Cameron and the Artist's Way, which is the part of the author and the material that I'm using to teach this webinar series. So that was a way that I rose up, used my rebel, and it turned out, you know, nothing but good came out of that, and nothing but good continues to come out of that because I continue my relationship with this executive. I'm sharing these examples with you because if you're like me, your rebel has said, you know, screw it, screw this, risen up and had positive results like the one I just shared, or your rebel child has reared its ugly side of it and reared up and you've had some really bad results, some backlash happen. And so I think that most of us, if we're not aware of where we are, if we're in our shadow side of that, where we're just rearing for the sake of rearing and we're not really thinking about the consequences, or if we're working in the lighter side of that, where we actually are aware of where we want to go and utilizing it to get us to that place. You know, most of us are not, if we're not aware of that, we may or may not have positive results. But what I want us to explore is where we can really harness the more positive side of this archetype so that we can end up more times than not with really, really positive, miraculous results in our life. And the example of that window company, you know, really stepping it up for us, that was just a miracle in and of itself. There's no way I could have done that on my own, by myself, in my little self. So let's take a moment here. If you have your journal or a piece of paper, you may want to just grab that and a pen. And I want us to get present to our own rebel. And I see Daryl is on the line right now. Daryl's got his pen, he's ready to go. Awesome. So let's go with it. So we're gonna, even though we're on video, we're gonna close our eyes. So I want you to close your eyes. And if you're still watching, it's gonna look really weird because everybody else has their eyes closed. And I want you to just tune into that rebellious side of you. So typically it could be that little 2-year-old that says no. And you know, that's the only word it knows is no. It could be that preteen teenager who loves to just say, I'm skipping class, I'm gonna go hang out in the back of the school, smoke pot, drink booze, whatever it is, smoke some cigarettes in the bathroom. So just tune into that part of you. And then I want you to think of a time where maybe you know, your rebel reared up, spoke up, said, this is enough, enough is enough, and you had really, really great results, or you had really, really disastrous results, and either way is okay, and maybe you've had both. I have many examples of experiencing both. And I just want you to just get clear on, is there any information that's in there for you? If you had disastrous results, do you look back and say, oh, if I would have done this instead of that, that would have gotten me a different outcome? Or if it went really well, what was it about that had a really positive outcome for you? And then I just want you to just ask this part of you what it wants you to know right now. Maybe there's something that is occurring in your life at this present moment where you could really use a little bit of that rebel to show up and to be your champion, to champion your cause. And so if there's anything that it wants you to know right now in this moment, just let that come through. And it doesn't even need to make sense, just let it all come out. And just bring this all to a close. Check back through your page and see if there's anything that jumps off the page at you. And bring yourself back to the present moment and back to being present with me. So I'm gonna open the line, and because I have Daryl with me, hi Daryl.
Hi there.
Just gonna invite you to share. Are there any questions that come up, or is there anything that really jumped off the page at you that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. Well, I guess if I could, I would just share when we went through that kind of guided meditation visualization, what came up for me. And then I have a couple of questions. Okay. I had two really distinct experiences that popped up in my mind connected to the rebel within me. One was in high school in a literature class where the teacher, in general, he was kind of gruff and was very sarcastic and kind of a smartass. That was just kind of the way he was, and I didn't like it at all. And most days I could tolerate it, but there was one day it came across as like really big disrespect. I just mouthed off at him, and I didn't care because it seemed so rude to me. It kicked me out of class. And then again, another classroom. This is fast forward into my junior year in college. I was studying in Strasbourg, France, and it was just it was a legit class, but it was more or less, all of the foreign students, taking classes at the university, and we were taking classes in literature and political science, things like that, but it was all about improving our language. So all the discussions were about just expanding grammar. But one of the topics that came up was about graffiti. And whatever tone the article took, and as a result, the professor took of it demonized a little bit the graffiti artists, and um, it just sparked this whole, like, it was again this space of disrespect, looking down upon. There may have been some racial overtones there, I don't know, but I finally just again kind of exploded, mouthed off, and it was. It's funny to reflect that, to think that I didn't cuss her out. I called my professor stupid in French. Um, yeah. So there's this realization, at least in my maybe less mature times, that the rebel would come out in times when I felt disrespected. And now thinking about using the rebel in my current living, it's more of an internal rebel. Like there's some certain habits and patterns and ways of being that I'm trying to break, and I need to harness that rebellious energy to really kind of get over the hump of resistance.
Yes.
So that's what.
Like one example of that, or maybe just even a thought.
With me. Yeah. So my desire is to. I'm working on a book, and there is plenty of time in my day, every day, to do something on the book. But there are, just certain habits and patterns of watching TV at a certain time, and saying I'm done with work for the day, or I'm going to spend this time during the day meditating, or I'm going to spend this time during the day doing this work. And all I need to do is just create some space for it. But I really feel like that there is a rebellion that needs to take place. There's a part of me that's fighting, that doesn't want to let go of whatever these habits and patterns are. And if I'm going to finish the book, I need to make time, so.
Yeah, and that would be, Cameron would say, I think she says, like, even if you do 2 pages a day, like, add that up over the course of a month, you got 60 pages right there.
Yeah.
So when you break it down, too, I think that's one of the things we'll talk about during the webinar. But sometimes it helps you even be like, all right, I can't think about this in the whole, but for right now, I can do 2 pages.
Yeah.
And it is sort of that you're telling me you can't do 2 pages today?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I have a question, and I don't know if you may entertain this more in the full series, but when you first started sharing, I wrote down 3 points. One, that looking at these 3, like the rebel, the saboteur, and the addict.
Yeah.
Personally, for me, when I initially hear those words, there's a bad taste in my mouth. So recognizing that it's hard for me to even consider looking at those. And then the questions that came up for me are, I understand the rebel, but what's behind it? And then 2, how does one discern when the rebel is, you're saying the upside of the dark, if we consider the, rebellion to be kind of a darker energy, but there's an upside to it, we can harness it for something. How do we discern maybe in moments when the rebel is in the plus column or in the minus column, in terms of, is it benefiting or taking away from our good?
Ooh, that's all really good. So first of all, thank you for summarizing this webinar series. Yes, there's your rebel, your procrastinator, and your addict can have some really shadow sides to them, and they can also work in conjunction with each other. So once one gets going, then the other one jumps on board, and before you know it, you're spiraling and you got to go eat tub of ice cream. So that's the reason why I chose to package the three of these up, because they all have a tendency, I've noticed in my life, they have a tendency to, they can really take me out, or they can really help me soar. And they have a tendency to work in conjunction with each other. So that was the reason, the inspiration behind sharing all three of these. But to your question, around how do we really harness the upside, there are different tools in different tips. And so let's move on, and let me share one tip with you that I use. So one of the tips that I use, and there will be more that I'll share in the webinar series, but one of them is just the recognition of second crop. So for those of you that don't know, second crop is, if you imagine your garden, it's beautiful, it's lush, it's plush, it's full of beautiful flowers and trees and bushes and everything else you want to throw in there. But it's a fact that if your garden has a lot of weeds in it, it makes it more difficult for the plants to grow. So you get in there, you weed, you get all those weeds out of there, you know, you clear it out so that you make space for your plants to really come forth in a lush and plush way. Now, what could happen is that a weed or two might show up along the way, and then all you do is you just get in there and you just pluck it out, right? The same thing can happen on a metaphysical level with changing your habits. So for example, Daryl is committing to writing 2 pages a day to his book, so he ends up with 60 pages. And before you know it, he's got all of his chapters done in a series of months, and he's got that puppy wrapped up and over to the publisher. So for Daryl, so keeping that in mind, what may happen is he may get a whole bunch of emails. He may see his favorite shows on TV. He may you know, have a bunch of laundry piling up. So he's got all these other things, his little weeds that are showing up. And in this case, he can simply say, wait, no, rise up, use his rebel. We are not going to get distracted by all of that noise. We are doing our 2 pages a day. And doesn't matter what it is, we can think it's crap, we can hate it, but we are going to do our 2 pages a day. And so in that example, it takes that moment to pause and say, okay, there's a lot of noise here that could really take me out and take me down and take me away from the very thing that I said I am committed to doing and you know, committed to changing, the habits and the patterns that I am committed to changing in my life. Come hell or high water, I am committed to changing this habit, changing this pattern. And so it's that moment of just taking that and saying, okay, let me take a breath here. What's really happening? Oh, okay, there's just some weeds popping up in my garden that I'm planting in the garden that I want to see. And so all this is second crop. That's it. Metaphysically, it's interesting because if there's only one of us, then is it the everything else around me, or is everything else around me just reflecting my own insecurity, my own fear, my own you know, self-worthiness? And in the end, it takes that moment to recognize, okay, this is all just a reflection of the booby traps that could keep me from the very success that I want to see, from the very habit that I want to change. Does that help, Daryl?
It does. It does. So you're saying that in terms of harnessing the upside of the rebel is that kind of that fighting energy or going against the grain of, whatever may be the tendency or habit, if it is to get distracted. I mean, you listed basically everything that distracts me: laundry, or dirty dishes in the sink. Of course, I can't do anything if there's dirty dishes in the sink. Or a TV show or something else, finding 90 million other things to do other than the work that's there before me, to then call upon that rebellious energy to take a stand and to buck the status quo of distraction and staying focused.
Yeah, and recognizing too that part of you changing your habit is that you will encounter things that will be counter to you actually changing that habit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like to call it second crop. I like to see it. For me, it's kind of more fun to play with it, to see it as my garden. And I'm, what am I sowing in my garden? And, okay, there's going to be a couple things popping up here. And all right, let's just pull back. Let's keep it light. Let's remember this is all part of the process.
So that second crop is analogous to, why am I still, I said I want to change my behavior. I'm doing these things to change it, but yet I'm still doing it. Or in the midst of changing, I have changed, I'm starting to do something different, and all of a sudden I want to go eat a whole pie.
Yeah, well, that's where your addict comes into play. So we'll explore. So this is good stuff, because you're right, because that's exactly what happens. You begin to see changes, and then your addict may sneak in there and take you down, or your rebel may start to take you down, and then your addict jumps on board, and then you got the two of them taking you down and taking you out. So yes. And so what I found is that if I can maintain perspective of what's really happening, that keeps me from downward spiraling. It keeps me on the upward spiral instead of going the downward spiral.
Cool.
You got it. Yes. Yeah, so we're going to see like a ton of pages from you, a chapter.
Yeah.
In the next month.
Absolutely.
Now that you're empowering your rebel to empower you to write.
I'm bucking the system.
Awesome.
The system of passivity.
And you can actually use your, if you want to yell at your side of you that doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like there's like, sometimes I have like that part that's rebelling against the very change that I'm rebelling toward, right? So it's like the shadow side is coming out. It's like, no, I don't want to do it. So if you have to, you can yell at it in French.
Okay.
Permission to rebel against your shadow side of your rebel.
Awesome.
In French. All right. So thank you for that question, because that's the perfect example, and that's what we're going to explore more in detail in our webinar, which is going to be an hour and a half. It's going to be next Tuesday live, starting at, I believe, 7:30. And if you miss it, and I'm hoping, Daryl, you can confirm that, you can still get the recording of it, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So if your rebels like Tuesday evenings at 7:30 is not going to do it for me, rebel against that and say, oh no, honey, we're signing up and we're going to do this when we feel good about it.
Yeah.
But I hope that this has given you a little example of what we're going to explore. And so the first part of this 3-part series is exploring how to really harness the upside of your rebel. The second part is how to harness your saboteur. And the third part is how to harness your addict. And what we're really looking at is really how to take yourself from good to great. And that can be in the area of success, like with you, Daryl, with your book. That can be in the area of health. That can be in the area of just cleaning up your habits so that you don't feel like you've got all these little ways that you're self-medicating yourself, keeping yourself in and stuck in your old habits and patterns. That's not going to get you from going from good to greater and greater and greater good. So if this at all calls to you, at all speaks to you, I invite you to sign up. You can go to soulgymwisdom.org. The event is listed there. And it's also on the Facebook page too. So if you haven't, I invite you to follow us. It's the Soul Gym Facebook page. So that's it for me. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing, Daryl.
Thank you for having me.
As always, I remind you to use your rebel to put play into your day every day, because while anyone can be creative and use their rebel in a very creative way, by accident, masters are creative by intention. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
See you all next Tuesday.